I'm back. I'll make a joke about that, but I'm actually not going to make a joke about that. We're going to talk about AR and VR and drones and some of the extraordinary things that are taking place in the application and in the research and development of that. And joining me to have this discussion, an esteemed panel. First up is Assistant Professor Giuseppe Loianno, who's at the NYU Tandon School of Engineering. He's a colleague, so please welcome him. You can just hold the applause until we get everyone seated here. Brian Streem of Vermeer, CEO and founder of Vermeer. And we have Marcelle Hopkins, who is the co-director of virtual reality. Co-director of virtual reality and deputy director of video at the New York Times. She's an award-winning filmmaker and has done both VR and film documentaries from Frontline to Al Jazeera to the New York Times. And we're going to start with Brian, who, as I noted, is the CEO and founder of Vermeer. He's a real pioneer in the field of drones and saw an opportunity in 2013, right, Brian? And launched his company in 2015. And I like what I read that you've said, which is that you're in the business of making pretty pictures. And to that point, before you tell us about what you've been up to, let's take a quick watch. Let's watch, rather, a video of some of the work that he and his team have done.
Aerobo.
Pretty cool stuff, right? Brian, take us behind the curtain. Talk to us about some of the work that you've done. Who have you been doing it for?
Sure, happy to. So yeah, thanks for having me. So my company kind of has been, for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been specializing in high-end cinematography with drones. My background is in, film production. And for me, like you said, I don't really care about the drone. I care about the movement of the camera. When I saw a drone 5 years ago, it kind of immediately became apparent to me, oh, we can put a camera on this and do whatever we wanted. So we just did a project for Turner Broadcasting. We work with HBO, Showtime, Netflix. The odds are if you see a drone shot in a movie or a TV show, the odds are we probably did it.
And how have you seen it evolve from the pictures into VR? Are you doing VR
Sure.
work, XR work? Describe what kind of demand you've seen
Sure.
as a result.
There's actually like another video. So my company actually, we've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, and we kind of noticed that there was a lot of friction between what customers wanted and how to kind of like tell it to our drone pilot and drone camera operator. Have people here flown drones before? Just like a quick show of hands. So, all right, cool.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah,
people find it funny. I have a drone company. I actually don't know how to fly a drone. I don't really care. For me, it's all about like the movement of the camera. And there's a lot of friction between what customers want and how to really describe to our pilots and our camera operators how to execute it. So what we built is we actually built a tool called Vermeer, which is this augmented reality drone navigation tool. and it is kind of predicated on this idea that the drone shouldn't fly the camera should fly the drone. So I don't know if we can, there's another video. Pretty much what happens, it's an iOS application. It works on all DJI drones, and DJI has, 80, 90% of the world drone market. And what you do is you essentially load up a 3D model of any place in the world. You see it in augmented reality, and then you kind of move your phone through the augmented reality landscape using the screen of your phone as if it's what the camera of the drone is going to be looking at. So no longer do you need to move joysticks and work with and intuit the thoughts and feelings and aesthetic of a drone pilot and a drone camera operator. You're just kind of it's supposed to simulate that thing that we all see directors of photography doing, which is when they go like this. So that's how we're using augmented reality. So we're essentially creating a flight path where we're saving GPS coordinates and camera orientation, and then we're sending it to the drone to execute. And I really wish they showed that video.
I think I'm going to have to take the bullet for that one. I may have
No, that's okay.
not made. I can see head shaking up there. Okay. So that means you have to go to his website to give us the website address.
It's getvermeer.com.
Getvermeer.com.
Correct.
And you are all witnesses. I now owe him one.
No, it's okay.
So I owe you one, Brian.
No, it's
I
okay.
apologize
It's okay.
for that. Was that built as a result of the demand from some of your clients? You're dealing with big brands.
Yeah, I mean, there was just, like I said, there's a lot of friction between, it was a few things. A lot of friction between just coordinating, being on the phone, trying to visually articulate what they want the drone to do, what they want something to look like. And then, the world is 3D. Cameras move around the world in 3D. You kind of needed a 3D interface to do it. So it was quality control, and it was kind of a guarantee that they would get exactly what they're looking for. And right now, if you're flying a drone as a manned pilot and camera operator, you're only as good as a human being. Human beings, there are faults.
We make mistakes. We
Yeah,
make mistakes.
sure.
For context, I think it's worth noting that drones, as many of you know, since many of you have piloted them, have exploded in the last couple of years. And within a 2-year, 3-year period, I think the FAA reports somewhere north of 750,000 drones that are registered. So that makes for some crowded skies. And Marcelle, I want to talk to you about how you've been thinking about drones and drone usage at the New York Times.
Sure, yeah. We started publishing AR projects earlier this year in February, and we've done about 10 or 11 projects so far, and we have not yet published a drone AR project, but I can tell you some of the experimentation that we've been doing with it. So we started thinking about applications for this with news. And 3D mapping, we thought would be a great application to create a tabletop 3-dimensional map for some of the stories that we were working on. So the first thing that we did with it just as an experiment was we pulled some drone footage of Eastern Ghouta in Syria off of the wires. We hadn't even shot it, we just pulled it up. And you can see here in the slide, we ran that through reality capture, which is a photogrammetry program, and we came up with this. And you can see it's not, it's far from perfect, but this gave us an idea of what we could build with drone photography. This is a place that we, as the New York Times, can't go. And we thought it was a really valuable way to show the destruction of one of the neighborhoods that had been bombed out in Eastern Ghouta. So that was the first thing that we did, just as an experiment. We didn't publish it. And then the next thing we did is we had a journalist, Ben Solomon, who was working on a story in the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh. And he went there at the time, if you can go to the next slide, he was reporting on preparations for the monsoon season in this camp. You can see this is where hundreds of thousands of people are taking refuge, and they're in this very hilly area that was previously unoccupied, and there's a great risk of landslides. We thought that creating a 3D map would help our audience understand better what that risk is and what these people are facing during the monsoon season. So if you go to the next slide, there should be a video, a drone video that Ben shot while he was there. So we can show just a few seconds of this. This is what that camp looks like. And you can see these houses are built on very steep inclines. They're right on top of each other. It's quite a dangerous place when there are heavy rains and flooding. If you go to the next slide, he did not fly the drone in a pattern that would be useful for building photogrammetry. He was flying it for video. But we then took that and put it through a photogrammetry program to see what we would get. And you can see the gray areas are basically blank spots that the drone imagery didn't cover. But what we did see out of this, if you go to the next slide, is there's some great detail. That structure that you see at the top of that hill, you can see a lot of that. You can see where the sandbags are. You can see how they built up a platform to build the structure on top of. You can see the two outhouses. You can see those very steep stairs. And that told us that this would be really valuable in our reporting on this refugee camp. Again, we didn't publish this. This was just an experiment. But then we started to think about what kind of pattern would we have to fly with the drone in order to get full coverage. If we wanted to cover a camp or a neighborhood or an area that was burned out by a wildfire, for example. And so our next experimentation, we just started doing with experimenting with flight patterns. And this is a bridge in Rhode Island. There's no news story attached to this. This was purely for our drone pilots to play with flight patterns. This one was done using concentric circles. There's another one that is essentially like mowing the lawn, where you go back and forth in a grid pattern, and you do that both ways, vertically and horizontally. And that usually one or the other, or a combination of both, generally gets full coverage of a large area. So we've been experimenting with those kinds of things.
And what are your conclusions based on those experiments relative to the potential impact for your users and for your viewers?
So there are several challenges that we've found so far. One you can see in this image, water or reflective surfaces don't work. They create all this artifacting. Everything under that bridge is water, and the detail of that did not come out in the photogrammetry. If you were trying to do a building, for example, one of these skyscrapers that has mirrored glass, that wouldn't work out. So that's one of the things we learned. We also learned that this, if anybody knows about photogrammetry, it's instead of pixels, it's polys, which is essentially faces. And an image like this has millions of polys. And in order to display an AR in our app, we have to bring it down to tens of thousands. And that process is called decimation. And it's really hard to decimate something that's millions of polys into tens of thousands of polys without losing the detail that we actually want to explain the story.
Brian, what's your experience with that? I know you have some thoughts. Fill
Yeah.
in some thoughts for us from your experience.
Well, I mean, when you build 3D models, I mean, a lot of people are using 3D models with drones kind of to, what I would say, to do like uninteresting things, like take stockpile measurements of, I don't know, like wood and dirt on construction sites. But I think that they're, for what the New York Times is doing, if you're doing storytelling, it's kind of like it's like a 3D, it's like a true 3D movie. You could take 3D models like this. You could import 3D models like this into our app, so you can now use a high fidelity 3D model to then chart a flight path for a drone. You could use 3D models like this, and you could animate a story. You could actually animate like a Pixar movie in augmented reality, and then you could project that. I don't know exactly what the Times is doing, but I've seen some of this stuff. But you could take a 3D model of a real world location. If you want to depict a battle that's going on, you could actually have people walk around it, and then you could animate figures and special effects. People like Peter Jackson are doing very interesting work where they're making 3D
The
augmented
director,
reality.
the famed director of Lord of the Rings trilogy and other movies.
Yeah. So yeah, and the quality of things like this in AR is like it's pretty astounding. And even with like small little drones, you can create like pretty photorealistic 3D models.
And Giuseppe, beyond even the evolution of the clarity of the pictures, talk to us about some of the extraordinary research that you've been doing about the mechanics of how you can actually operate a drone and taking pictures.
Yes, so thanks.
And please let us know when you want to see the video.
We can basically run it. I mean, many people work with drones, like using them for photography. We have another focus that's mainly on the autonomy piece. We want to make these machines basically able to fly autonomously without pilots, eventually cooperating between each other. For example, in this case, we are trying to run the. Okay, it's run. So yeah, we are trying to make, as I was mentioning, this machine autonomously. We are trying to interface them with humans, trying to, for example, in this case, using VR and AR or like even eyeglasses tools to command them, just using the gaze. So we are at the point that basically this machine don't need any more a pilot, and they can be basically commanded with intuition or with some kind of other types of interactions. The other aspect is that we...
But hold on a second, what do you mean he doesn't need a pilot? Isn't he the young man with the glasses? He's directing it, right?
Yeah,
so he is the pilot.
He's the pilot, but you don't need any more remote control or anything. So it's becoming very intuitive and very easy to basically command a drone. So in this case, many people were using motion capture systems. So basically a set of cameras like Vicon that was mentioned before to fly these drones. Now we are at the stage that all these drones are autonomous. So as you can see in this video, the drone works just with a single camera and inertial sensors. So we have developed this technology that just with one camera and inertial sensing, you basically are able to fly this drone without a pilot. The drone builds the map itself on board, may avoid obstacles, and actually a miniaturized version of this drone will soon go next year in the Fukushima power plant. So we are building that drone of 8 centimeters that's fully autonomous. So we are focusing on some of the next research challenges, which are mainly driven nowadays by the application. So for example, there are many people interested in bridge and power plant inspection. Other application is transportation. So we are looking on how to have autonomous agents to cooperatively transport like some payload. And for example, in this case, we are also trying to fly just using an inertial measurement unit without even a camera. So just like a chipset, that's everything working on the drone. And we show that's possible. I mean, so we work mainly on the fundamental, and we don't use any GPS, and everything is mainly working on board, as you can see from these images, basically.
Just a quick request to the control folks. Can you let us know when we have about 10 minutes, because that clock's not running. So if you could just let us know so we don't run over, because we could clearly talk about many things for a very long time, and we don't want to do that. So you're talking, when are we going to be able to walk into a store and buy a drone that's gaze or eye tracking enabled?
That's an excellent question. I mean, technically, this is going to happen soon, because VR and AR tools are already available. Drones, commercially available drones, you can go into the store and buy a DJI. So basically, it's just a matter of making an interface between the AR, VR toolkit and basically the drone. So it's going to happen.
So let me go down and ask of each of you, what do you think the biggest challenge is for you right now, and what are you most excited about? So Marcelle, do you want to start? What are you most excited about, and what is you mentioned challenges relative to the size of the files, right, and delivering a useful experience?
One of the other challenges that we're facing in news is the flight restrictions, often in areas where there's a disaster. that we would be covering with news, and where drone photography would be really helpful. We're not allowed to fly there because of FAA flight restrictions. So we're trying to figure out ways to work around that. The thing I'm hopeful about is that through AR we can display three-dimensional maps that will give people hopefully a better understanding of a better spatial awareness, a better understanding of the story, some of the detail that they could see in these places that they can't visit. So I think that's going to be really exciting when we figure out how to do that.
And how far away do you think we are?
Close.
Close? I like that. Close sounds good, right? Close sounds like it could be like at any moment. I like that. Okay, Brian, what are you most excited about, and what do you see as some of the largest challenges for you?
Everything's challenging, nothing's easy, but I mean, Vermeer, our product, our app, it launched like a week or two ago, so we're just like early days. It's in the App Store, has a few hundred downloads, people are using it. We actually used it, I don't know if anybody's a golf watcher, there was a Phil Mickelson and Tiger Woods thing on Thanksgiving. We actually used it during the golf broadcast. We used Vermeer for live broadcast transmission. And it was actually the first time they ever used a drone for this particular company to broadcast the golf. So they were using drones, and now they were using this cool Vermeer tool to do it. So
where can we see that? Just to interrupt you, where can we actually see that? I think many of you may have read about there was a bit of a mishap around this golf tournament with people who paid and people who didn't.
Oh, I don't know anything about that.
Okay, that's sidebar. But where can we actually see what some of that video might be?
I think there's a blog post about it on our website. If you want, I think it was live, so they were shooting BTS video. So as soon as I get the BTS video, I'm sure we're going to post an article or something like that about it, so you can kind of see Vermeer in action and how it was utilized. In terms of challenges, the technology that at least we built, it's all kind of, I think, the technology is one thing. It's like go to market and execution, and I believe that in the future, I think drones are just kind of beginning. I think there's a huge market opportunity for it. And the vision is that in the future, all drones are going to be flown via augmented reality. And our tool is the first tool to do that.
Well, what about, to Marcella's point about the skies being really crowded, is that something that you've run into? Obviously, she's covering news, which is different, but is that an issue? Have you seen tremendous growth? Does that impinge upon anything that you're doing?
So I am kind of kind of stunned by it. I mean, we were like the first 5 or 6 companies to get FAA approval to fly drones in the U.S. And in the early days, it was like a real pain. I mean, we're flying tons of drones all over the country, and I gotta say, it's easy. It's easy now. I sincerely, I mean, you can't fly one over Midtown Manhattan. You can fly one in downtown Los Angeles. I could get permission. I've done it hundreds of times. I mean, so it has been kind of cleared up quite a bit. They're even allowing you to fly closer to airports, and so I just don't see regulations really being the thing. There is still limits on beyond visual line of sight. You can't send a drone from here to New Jersey right now, but I don't know if the market's even ready for an application that would warrant that sort of a thing.
Giuseppe, what are you challenges, and then what are you most excited about?
So the main challenge is, I think, to put on the same page who works on the technology and the government. So that's going to be a big challenge. It's like I do always the same comparison that was done when the car started to be used. So we are at the same stage. At the beginning, everyone was trying the car, but no one had driving license. There were no rules and anything. So that's exactly the same thing, except that we are now going in 3D space. It's going to be much more complex and tedious process for the government to regulate, basically. In terms of challenges and excitement, I'm very excited about this technology that, I mean, I was working in a lab before that basically started this technology. If you see the main controller that you have when you fly a drone, that stuff that has been developed on the East Coast in the US, and now it's on Chinese product. So we built this technology from really the starting point when we were flying with motion capture system. People didn't even know how to make a controller and stabilize a vehicle. So I've started this in 2009, 2010. So I've seen the entire growth. So we went from the lab space to the market space within 5 or 6 years, which has been amazing, but at the same
That
time...
sounds astonishing, actually. 5 year cycle.
Within 5 years, I'm telling you, 2009, 2010, we're doing this stuff in a lab. Within 5 years, we went into completely market, and now you can buy a drone for photography. The main things that I think is gonna happen is that drones will be very useful for many applications. You may think about not only transportation, but also there is big problem in the US about bridges or more in general infrastructure maintenance. So this is a big challenge. Agriculture, manufacturing, but bridges and infrastructure, that's a big problem because it's a very tedious process to go to inspect for a person, going there, see the cracks, if it's at the point of to be critical or not. And this can be basically automated with drone technology and new machine learning algorithm. And that's what's happening in research right now.
We have time for one question. Is there one person in this audience who has a desire that is so intense that okay, there we go, right there. We have 2 minutes and 25 seconds.
Hi, I'm Mallory Taylor. I'm looking at this from a novelist standpoint, so that's not very academic. So I'm thinking, how could I use this technology in novels? But then I'm also thinking, how could this be used for nefarious means? You know what I'm saying? So we're looking at this like, how can we help the infrastructure? But this could be militarized. This could be used for terrorism. Like, how are we negotiating these spaces of how it could be used well and how it could be used poorly? What does anybody think?
Okay, Professor.
So that's an excellent question. So it's like, I do always another comparison. So you have a knife in the kitchen. The knife is dangerous. So you can use the knife in a bad way or in a good way. The same is with drone. It's becoming a society problem and an educational problem. So it's at this point, it's not only the government, but also in the families and in cultural environment that we need to basically educate people to use things in the right way. Regarding the other stuff, how it's automated and everything, so the drones will inspect this kind of bridges. We are already doing it, and the algorithm directly maps basically the position of the drone in a structured environment with exactly the crack or the detection of the failure inside the space. So that's something we're working on.
Brian or Marcella, do either one of you want to sort of comment? I mean, I think it's fair to say contextually that there are a lot of unintended consequences. I mean, I'm quite sure that Facebook, well, let me not speak out of turn. There are consequences that we couldn't have foreseen, right?
Yes.
5, 10, 15 years ago around some of these technologies.
With anything.
Exactly. So then might we be thinking about what some of the downsides would be? Go ahead, Brian.
Honestly, bad stuff happens. I mean, with anything. I mean, bad stuff happens with anything. 3-4 years ago, there were going to be drones crashing into all sorts of planes. Pilots were seeing drones at 40,000 feet. I mean, pilots also see UFOs in the sky. I mean, it's just overblown. I mean, it's so overblown. It's so much of like that industry, every industry, there's like a fear element component to it. But none of that stuff ever happened. I mean, more turtles crash into planes when they're taking off than drones ever crash into planes.
The U.S. military was using drones long before civilians were, and they were using drones to assassinate people in other countries, and now actually terrorist groups are using them to fly bombs over, the line of control in Mosul, for example. So that is happening, and that was happening long before we were using them for civilian purposes.
All right, well, I think that's a pretty good note to end on. Drones, VR, XR, we'll see how that all moves forward. Giuseppe, Marcella, Brian, thank you very much.
Thank you.